Kitchen. My name is Carol Hamilton. I'm a 4-H agent in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and today I'm going to teach you how to make rosemary bread. So today's recipe is going to utilize yeast, which is a fungus. So we're going to get our yeast activated, which means we're kind of waking it up from its dormant state. So I have my hot water kettle. I've heated the water to 110 degrees, and I'm going to pour out 1 cup into a measuring cup. I'm going to add 1 packet of active dry yeast. And 1 tablespoon of sugar. And I'm just going to gently mix this. You don't have to mix it, but this just allows the sugar to dissolve and be readily available for the yeast. We're going to let our yeast set for about 5 minutes as we prepare some of our other ingredients. So the next ingredient we're going to prepare is going to be our rosemary. Now I picked rosemary out of my garden at home. If you don't have fresh rosemary, you can always purchase fresh rosemary, or you can just use a dried rosemary from the store. So what we're going to do is we're just going to trim off the leaves of the rosemary, because we're going to chop those into smaller pieces, which will go inside and on top of our bread today. And rosemary has a nice fragrance to it and brings a lot of flavor to the bread. If you're not a fan of rosemary, you can easily substitute this with another herb or spice that you do enjoy. Some people like to use some cheese. Cheese always gives a nice flavor to bread as well. And once we have all our leaves trimmed off our stem, we will chop them. Okay, so we have a nice little bunch of rosemary here, and I'm going to use my big chef knife, and I'm just going to go through and chop the rosemary into smaller pieces. There shouldn't be any big stems in here, it should just be the leaves of the rosemary. You can chop this as fine as you would like. I like a little bit of the green texture in my bread to show up, so I'm not going to chop it too fine, but just in little pieces. So when you bite into your bread, you don't feel like you're eating a big leaf, but you still get all the flavor of the rosemary. Now that our rosemary is prepped, you could go ahead and measure out your flour. I already have our flour measured today. It's 2.5 cups. And I also have my flour on the counter because we're going to need some extra as we begin to knead and prepare our dough. So I'll go ahead and add that to my mixing bowl. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. Perfect. You can also prepare 1 tablespoon of butter, and we're going to use a 2nd tablespoon when the bread comes out of the oven to coat the top of the bread and give it that nice buttery flavor. But we can also add that to our mixer. We can also add about half of our rosemary that we've chopped up to our mixer at this time. The other half will go on top of the bread. Let's come back to our yeast now. It's been 5 minutes, and as you can see, we've got this nice foamy yeast mixture. So our yeast is activated, it's ready to do its work. And how yeast functions in a yeast bread is it starts to consume or break down the sugars in the bread. And as it breaks down the sugars, it's going to release carbon dioxide, and that allows our bread to rise and have that nice airy texture to it. Our next step is pouring our yeast, water, and sugar mixture into our mixing bowl. If you have a food processor or bread machine, this would work as well. I'm going to put it on a low setting. I'm going to slowly pour our yeast mixture into the bowl. And we'll let this go on a low speed for about a minute. If you happen to have a dough hook for your mixer or food processor, you can put your dough hook on once it's become a dough mixture, and you're gonna let it go for about 5 minutes on a medium setting. And this is going to do the process of kneading your dough. Now, I don't have a dough hook today, so I'm going to demonstrate how you would knead your dough by hand. As you can see, we have a nice ball of dough on the end of the beater. I'm gonna clear space to knead my dough, and then I'll pull it off the beater and begin kneading by hand. I'm going to prepare my counter. If you have a pastry mat, you can use that as well. Make sure you wash your counter before you do this step and dry it. And go ahead and sprinkle flour over the space where you're going to knead your bread. Make sure you have flour on your clean hands for this kneading process. We can then come to the beater, and you can just pull the dough off by hand. And as you can see, all the dough is kind of clumped into one ball. I'm going to pull that out of my mixing bowl. Okay, so the goal of kneading is to create this nice elastic texture in your dough and remove some of the lumps. When you're kneading by hand, it's recommended that you knead your dough for about 10 minutes. Which can be a little bit of a workout if you're not used to it. So what you want to do is take your dough in a ball and push it forward or away from you, and then pull it back and press it back down. And you can continue to do this while turning your dough, so every part gets incorporated. Your dough is going to pick up some of the flour on the counter, and that's fine. We don't want to add too much flour, but we want to make sure that our dough is not sticking to the counter or sticking to our hands. My hand's getting a little sticky, so I'll just tap it in the flour and then continue to knead. Okay, we've kneaded our dough for about 10 minutes. We have this nice, beautiful consistency that's very elastic. And we're just gonna mold our dough into a nice, smooth ball. And then we're gonna prepare a bowl for it to rise in. I recommend a glass bowl that you've sprayed with cooking spray. You can place your dough inside. I also recommend putting a damp towel or paper towel over your bowl. And again, this creates a nice humid environment for your dough to rise. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to make an artificial proofing space for our dough today. So I'm using my oven. My oven is off. I have boiling water in my pot, and I'm just going to pull out the bottom rack where I have a glass pan. And I'm going to fill the glass pan with the boiling water. And this is going to create a very steamy environment for my bread to rise. Our bread has had the opportunity to rise for about an hour. As you can see, it is doubled in size. And we're going to punch it down, releasing the carbon dioxide that's trapped inside the bread right now. Shape it into our 2 bread loaves, and then let it raise one more time. Just going to try to get 2 even loaves in oil. Round them into nice, smooth balls. And go ahead and place them on the pan that they're going to bake on. You can easily make this recipe into rolls. Just divide the dough into 8 to 10 rolls instead of 2 small loaves. have our 2 small loaves, and I'm actually going to grind some sea salt on the top of these and sprinkle the remainder of our rosemary. You can actually press that into the top. We're gonna allow our bread loaves to rise one more time. This time it's only gonna be for 45 minutes, but I'm going to put them back into the oven that we created, that proofing box atmosphere of high humidity and a little bit of heat. I'll add some additional boiling water to my glass pan on the bottom shelf and set my timer for 45 minutes.